As all of you know, I, as your liberty-loving Latino, I despise collectivist thought that leads to moronic economic systems like socialism and communism. Those economic systems lead to governments that abridge basic human rights. They impose poverty on their citizens, and they result in chaos and death. I, as a conservative, am unapologetically opposed to the Socialist Democrat Party that has largely been taken over by these inhuman elements. Sadly, the Republicans are not universally on board in opposing the insidious ideology of the American left. Taking out the trash, a focus on the house cleaning that's long overdue in the GOP in tonight's preamble. In our not-so-distant past, Republicans used to be universally conservative, and Democrats were universally liberal. They disagreed on issues, but we used to be united under our Constitution. We used to be united on bedrock American principles like free speech, the equal application of the rule of law, and preservation of debate in place of violence. Today, the Democrats have abandoned Americanism to become the Socialist Democrat Party. They no longer believe in free speech for all. They support left-wing violence to threaten and intimidate those of you who have a view that, well, is in contrast to what they believe. And they've targeted our Constitution for destruction. In its place, they wish to institute a banana republic that outlaws their political opposition. Speaking of that opposition, the GOP has devolved into a navel-gazing, largely ineffective lot. A minority of conservatives in that party have taken bold stands against the devolving deviancy of Democrats, putting the needs of American citizens first. But an alarming number of Republicans have abandoned their opposition to left-wing extremism and decided to provide political cover for socialist Democrats who seek the ruin of our country. Now, one of the leaders of the Surrender Caucus is a man, and I use the term loosely, by the name of Adam "Crying" Kinzinger. After betraying the district he didn't represent, Mr. Kinzinger has announced, my friends, that he is going to, well, he is not going to run for re-election. And, well, Mr. Kinzinger is actually decidedly against America First policies. Upon making his announcement, Kinzinger wrote, "I cannot focus both on a re-election to Congress and a broader fight nationwide. I want to make it clear, this isn't the end of my political future, but the beginning," end quote. Now, this would indicate to me that he has a long career ahead of him at CNN or MSNBS, where Crying Kinzinger will do what Republicans these days are doing best, stabbing conservatives in the back and supporting left-wing extremists in their bid to institute government control and destroy American freedom. Kinzinger was one of the 10 Republicans to vote to impeach President Trump on what we now know are fake charges. In response to Crying Kinzinger's announcement, President Trump simply said, quote, "2 down, 8 to go." As contemptible as Kinzinger is, he doesn't hold a candle to the biggest betrayer of the conservative movement. Her name is Liz Cheney. In the wake of the January 6th riots, an event that was a one-day snapshot of 2 years of left-wing riots, arson, beating, and killings in the wake of George Floyd, Liz Cheney, without any evidence, alleged that President Trump was the ringleader behind the sad events of January 6th. She and other GOP socialist enablers voted to impeach without the facts. Liz Cheney blamed President Trump's speech in the Capitol as justification for her vote, claiming President Trump called for the violence that followed. Now, an examination of the transcript shows that Trump did not call for violence. But then we learned that the pipe bombs that were found near the Capitol were planted the night before the riot. Now, how could President Trump's speech be responsible for pipe bombs if he hadn't even delivered the speech yet? Then we learned from the FBI that evidence shows that President Trump didn't coordinate the riots in any way, further undermining the predicate for Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and other left-wing GOP votes. After this evidence was presented, anyone with integrity would have apologized to the former president and begged for forgiveness from the American people and their voters. But left-wing enablers have no integrity. That's why they're left-wing enablers. Cheney had already crossed the Rubicon. She had already thrown her lot in with some of the most rabid socialists in government. So she signed up for the January 6th commission, and Cheney is now bashing any attempt by news organizations to actually ask questions that challenge her non-fact-based narrative. Captain Ahab needs to slay her white whale. Adam Kinzinger at least had enough wherewithal to announce he wouldn't seek re-election. Now Cheney is ready to drag the country and the people she doesn't represent in her district through the political mud. Mrs. Cheney and Kinzinger and the Surrender Caucus's efforts are based on revenge and abhorrence for everything President Trump stands for. He stands for freedom, economic prosperity, and the rule of law. President Trump puts Americans first. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and the Surrender Caucus put Socialist Democrats first. And Socialist Democrats put foreigners first. In the latest example of that, it was announced that Joe Biden and his socialists are working to pay every illegal alien who was separated from their children, because in America we don't jail children for the crimes of their parents. The leftists want to force you to pay every one of those illegals $450,000. Now, we expect a healthy number of Republicans, including Cheney and Kinzinger, will be in support of this. Just another way for the ruling class to punish all of you who follow Trumpism, the rule of law, and America first.